so I just blind bought it. Don't really know what it's about. Looks like a lot of murder. Cultish. It's called Cultish. So we're just gonna ignore the elephant in the room here. And I'm gonna do a book haul. Oops. I have filmed this intro now 3 times because this camera, she is very convenient, but boy is she finicky because I was out of focus both times. Sometimes I don't notice. Essentially what I'm trying to say is this is a nonfiction book haul. My sister has sent me some TikToks that have some great book suggestions that I got some inspiration from and some other recommendations from. By the way, my sister has a booktube as well. I'm gonna put her channel in the description box below. She's an avid reader, better at describing books than I am, and I honestly get a lot of my book suggestions from her. So if you guys like reading and booktube content, I would highly suggest checking out her channel. So that's gonna be in the description box below, but she knows that I like these style of books, and I, like many people, sometimes feel like the nonfiction book world turns into a lot of like self-help and business books, and while I like those style of books, I also think that there's a ton of different topics. We are gonna be covering a lot of different topics, a lot of different books, a lot of really good ones, and a lot of highly recommended books, because not only did I take the suggestions from these book TikTokers, that sounds right. But the gold is in the comment sections of these videos, because the audience, a lot of times there's like aggregate information in there, which I took some inspiration from. So there are a lot of good books in here. Let's go into the haul. Oh my gosh, I hope I was not out of focus that whole time. Okay, so the next book that I got is In Shakespeare's Shadow, a rogue scholar's quest to reveal the true source behind the world's greatest plays. I have been someone who likes Shakespeare's work, is somewhat familiar with it, but I don't really know a lot of the history behind Shakespeare, the playwright, and there's a lot of lore behind, is Shakespeare one person? Is he potentially a woman? A lot of those types of things. So I believe this explores that type of idea. So it's just gonna be basically talking about like the origins of like some of those theories. This is actually a book I have started reading actually on my Kindle. So now I have a physical copy, I can read this. This is The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. I have to tell you, I am so far enthralled by this book. The Radium Girls are, I hate to use the word iconic because that really is just glossing over what a serious and terrible situation the clock painters, aka the Radium Girls, were. Basically all the health detriments that came along with lip tipping, which is basically like licking the paintbrush and getting radium into their system. And the years of suffering, the lives lost is insane. And the Radium Company basically tries to hide a lot of the health issues associated with the radium exposure. So I'm probably a little less than halfway through this book. Again, I'm reading it on my Kindle, so I have to look, but I think I'm like 40% of the way through. And it's a very fascinating read. It's devastating, but also just, it feels like a completely different era when you realize it was only like 100 years ago. You're just like, wow. And honestly, there's a lot of parallels to how like some of these capitalistic companies operate, and I'm sure we're gonna have our own version of like Radium Girls in the future where we'll look back on certain industries and think like, how could we have let that happen? But this is really good so far. I've had nightmares reading this because sometimes I read it at night, so I've started to read it in the morning. So this was actually, I think I saw this based off a suggestion when I was picking up The Radium Girls, and this is The Woman They Could Not Silence, the shocking story of a woman who dared to fight back. So just to read the first paragraph on the back of the book: as the clash between the states rolls slowly to a boil, Elizabeth Packard, housewife and mother of 6, is facing her own battle. The enemy sits across the table and sleeps in her next room. Her husband of 21 years is plotting against her because he feels increasingly threatened by Elizabeth's intellect, intelligence, and unwillingness to stifle her own thoughts. So Theophilus makes a plan to put his wife back in her place. One summer morning, he has her committed to an insane asylum. Sound familiar? So I, like I said, have so far really liked Kate Moore's writing style, so I think I'm going to hopefully really enjoy this. This one's a bit of a doozy. So this book, I'm familiar with the author. I want to say it's like 1,000 Ships or something like that. She had a book that I was really looking into around the time that I was reading Song of Achilles. And so I was really into Greek mythology or Greek mythology based books, and I just read Circe, and so I was looking into more books that were kind of along that same vein. So that's kind of how I was turned on to this author, and it just kind of like slipped my mind. So anyways, I purchased a different book, but by the same author, and it's Goddesses in Greek Myth, Divine Might. And this is a nonfiction book based on some of the theology behind Greek myths. So I have a feeling this is going to be kind of similar, but following a couple different Greek gods. Jumping to true crime. Feels very, you know, on the nose for a woman in her 30s. But this is called Written in Bone, Hidden Stories and What We Leave Behind by Sue Black. She is an anatomist and forensic anthropologist. And it says back here that her forensic expertise has been crucial in solving high-profile criminal cases. And I love that kind of stuff. I'm always interested in learning more about like this scientific methodology in solving crimes. And so this seemed like a book that would be right up my alley, and maybe a little bit morbid at times, probably very morbid at times and gruesome, but you know, that's the body. The last book I picked up from Amazon is The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. Now, I've actually read her book, which is called The Cult. No. Cultish. It's called Cultish, where she basically talks about like the language of modern cults, everything from like MLMs to, what is that spin class? Soul Cycle, and that other fitness class where they jerk the barbell, very dangerously looking, CrossFit. I'm sure there's a method to it, but to me it looks intimidating. So anyways, same author. I enjoyed that book. I actually think I might have given it a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 stars. So the idea of this book is basically the phenomena of us reaching for all these types of self-help books in the pursuit of basically perfecting ourselves and like over optimization of our personalities and like how we operate in the world, which is me to a T. Like a perfect book for me to read. And like I said, I like the author, so I'm excited to read this. Aha, it says author of culture right here on the book. All right, so moving on to the books that I picked up from BookOutlet. BookOutlet I really like to shop from because a lot of times you can get really good discounts, and I've noticed they've had very good inventory lately. My problem is lately I will buy a book, pay full price, and then I'll see it on BookOutlet like a week later. Like, no joke, this has happened to me like 3 or 4 times, and now I default to checking BookOutlet first because a lot of times they'll have like new releases or very popular books in like the TikTok, book talk world, or like booktube. So it's a very good resource. They have good discounts. In fact, I saw they were like competing with like Amazon's like book sale day, whatever it's called, and they were like offering better discounts. I think they have great books, as we're going to find out here. This is a book that I saw in the comment section of the TikToks that I was talking about, where they suggested like nonfiction books, and this is A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. This is a blind buy. I have no idea what this is about. It's kind of in the era of like in the empire of ancient Rome at its peak, and something about that. We've got Caesar, Caligula, Claudius, so I just blind bought it. Don't really know what it's about. Looks like a lot of murder. Speaking of murder, American Serial Killers, The Deadliest Years, 1950 to 2000. I'm kind of exploring the idea of how interesting it is that I'm sure there are modern day serial killers, but we don't necessarily have like the Ted Bundys or the Marilyn Mansons or Ramirez. And while that's a good thing, obviously, it does feel like a different era. And so this is another book based off of exploring some of those serial killers, created a lot of this like underbelly of fear in American culture. So I want to read this. This was something I think I just found as I was perusing through BookOutlet, so this was a me find. This one looks cool. This is Cold Warriors, Writers Who Waged the Literary Cold War. Okay, so this basically talks about a lot of those authors during the time, you know, like the authors you read as literary mandatory requirements in school, like George Orwell, we have Ernest Hemingway, and a lot of these thinkers of the time had very alternative ideas to the mainstream media during the time of the Cold War. And so I think that this would be a really interesting era to explore, because I actually had never really sat down and thought about how many authors were writing against the grain during that time. This one's also a thick boy. I am in my era of reading nonfiction books about people who come from lifestyles that I have no understanding of, because I I would call myself an empathetic person. I feel like nowadays that kind of carries a negative connotation, but really I do try to understand all spectrums of life because I understand that no one leads a life in a similar or even necessarily parallel path. Everyone has like different paths that they go down or have come from. And so this is a book that I think will be really enlightening to me as someone who has people with addiction in their lives, but I don't really understand it because I've never gone through it personally myself. The way that I can kind of navigate that is reading books about the topic so I can have a better understanding of what's going on and the thinking process of people who are going through different struggles that I'm going through. So in the realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction. This is supposed to be a really, really good book, highly suggested, and Dr. Gabor Mate is one of the leading psychologists in addiction. I finished a book a couple months ago called Insane, basically talking about America's treatment of those who have mental illnesses. And so I think that this would be a very complimentary book to that because it's actually very eye-opening when you start to realize that the institutions that you think are put in place by maybe America or the government or whoever you think is the entity that should be helping these people, sometimes they frankly don't exist or they don't operate in a way that you would logically think that they would or should. So these are very helpful for me. This one's fun. Okay, so this is The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England, a handbook for visitors to the 14th century. This author, Ian Mortimer, has these books in different eras and areas. So I figured I would try medieval England. I'm realizing I'm missing a book here because I actually started reading a book. I'm going to put it on screen here. It's about a day in the life of different people who lived during the Roman era. This is from another author, kind of similar idea, but not really. And this one's going to be about medieval England. So because they both kind of have similar ideas, I'm kind of reading one of each author so I can figure out which one I like better. The last book I picked up from BookOutlet is Mindhunter. I didn't know this was a book. I watched the Netflix series and like everyone else was completely disappointed in Netflix for canceling it. To explain to you kind of what this is about, the FBI has this specific unit where they study the psychology of serial killers. It's interesting because the time that this criminal unit was formed, it was almost like a controversial idea to be studying and giving these serial killers that much attention or, you know, trying to understand the mind behind it. But now we can look back on that and realize there is some important scientific discovery when it comes to the psychology and how to potentially prevent more people like this and this happening to other people. Last but not least, this is a new website that I have never shopped on. Again, I like to buy my books secondhand if I can, because not only do I think it's better for the environment and I get the same experience from it, but also I like a discount. So I picked up these books from Second Sale. At the time when I was picking out these books, they had some type of promo going on where if you bought 3 books under $5, you got the 4th book free. And I will say, compared to like Thriftbooks or AbeBooks or like some of the other secondhand bookshops that I've shopped from online before, I feel like the condition of these books are a little worse than was listed on the website. Like sometimes with Thriftbooks, I feel like I get better books than the condition was. So if you care about that, I would say maybe be careful on Second Sale, but experience-wise, it's fine. This first one is missing the dust jacket. Anyways, this is The Ghost Map, and I think this was also another book that I picked out because I saw some of the commenters talking about how this book was good. This is a story with 4 protagonists, a deadly bacterium, a vast city, and 2 gifted but very different men. One dark week 150 years ago in the midst of great terror and human suffering. We're gonna try that. This next book is The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. Among Child, Her American Doctors, and the Collision of 2 Cultures. I think it's gonna be really interesting to read about this because it's basically, again, like the intersect of kind of like Eastern and Western thinking and culture. So being Hmong, having that kind of like Eastern perspective, having a completely different religion and like thought process as to how the world works with the spiritual world. And then you have that dichotomy of being a doctor, a Western doctor at that, who has basis in like the scientific method. I think this is gonna be really good. The Witches. This is about basically exactly the title. Suspicion, Betrayal, and Hysteria in 1692 Salem. This is supposed to be really good. Like anyone else, a lot of interest in this era of time because again, it's kind of similar to the Radium Girls. It's very bizarre for me to think of a time where people get away with this. And once again, the target are women. So I think this is going to be really interesting. I have a feeling I'm going to see a lot of parallels to how, society thinks about women today in this. The last book we have for this haul is Kindred Neanderthal, Life, Love, Death, and Art by Rebecca Rags Sykes. She has spent her career studying Neanderthals, and I have no knowledge of Neanderthals. It sounds really weird that I would decide that my brain needs to have this like section in my brain to Neanderthals, but I do think it's really interesting to see kind of like how we as hominins have kind of evolved over time. Even though I know we're from a different branch than Neanderthals, I do think it's interesting to see kind of like that like bipedal evolution. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this haul. It's really nice to sit down and talk about books. If you guys have been following like me on The Beauty Breakdown, which is my beauty channel, or me now on TikTok, I have been talking about books on TikTok. That's kind of where I've been getting out some of like my bookie vibes. And so if you guys want some more like short little tidbitty type of that, definitely follow my TikTok. But I am trying to post here more regularly. It is so many things have changed over the past couple of months. I'm wondering if I should do an update on this channel because I've had a lot of really exciting new career things happen in my life that have taken a lot of my bandwidth. And so if you guys would be interested in hearing about that, let me know. If not, maybe I'll make something on The Beauty Breakdown and like link it somewhere. Oh, it's so, if you guys have like done social media, you would know like how hard it is to like maintain one platform. And I feel like 5 or 6 that I'm trying to do because I do have all these interests and I do genuinely love sharing them with you guys. So hopefully this is okay. I'm excited to get to reading some of these. Definitely keep an eye out for some updates on me reading some of these books. Like I said, I've already gotten started on some of them. So we're going to have some good reading coming up, especially for those of you guys who are like me, who like nonfiction books or are just interested in like learning more through reading. As always, I hope you guys are happy and healthy, and don't forget to read, comment, subscribe, share with your friends and family, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!